everybody! If you didn't notice already, my throat is really, really sore. I have a sinus infection, so you'll just have to kind of suffer through this with me. Might be a little choppy. I'm gonna take breaks probably to blow my nose, do all that kind of thing. Oh, hey, kitty. Come on. Come on. Funnily enough, we're gonna learn about consent today, but I'm going to liken it to cats because I think that's appropriate. Cats, if they come to you, that usually means they want attention. If they don't come to you, when you go to them, you usually get about 3 pets and then they'll probably attack you. Because they're cats. They're the best ones to identify boundaries for everybody, I think. Say if you pet a cat too, and then they run away and maybe they never let you pet them again. Just because you pet them once doesn't mean you get to pet them again either. And I think that's in certain sexual relationships too, they think, oh yeah, well, I slept with that person once, I can do it again. Not always. That's not usually how it works. Maybe your first interview of that sexual experience didn't go well. Maybe you don't get to do it again. Like, that person gets to decide that too. So unless cats even want your attention, usually don't give it to them. If they allow you to come into their space, then absolutely go ahead. But if not, watch their body language. Like, see, Mordu wants the pets right now, but later she'll probably scratch me if I try and touch her, so kitty. But, with any animal, say you go up to them and they're not comfortable with you being there, they'll probably put their ears back, they'll probably show some sort of body language that will tell you, I don't want your attention, man, like, get away from me, or, dude, whatever. Not just a man, sorry. And I think that's something that, we need to pay more attention to in human beings is the body language of it all, right? Like, say you go to put your hand on a person and they don't want to be touched and they stiffen up and things get a little weird. That's a cue not to touch them, typically. Especially if you're going through crowds. All you gotta do is tap somebody on the shoulder. There's absolutely no need for you to put your hand on the small of somebody's back or to even like move them, things like that. You can just easily tap them on the shoulder if you need to, if they can't hear you or something like that. Just be like, excuse me, could you please move? Or I need to get through there, may I please go through there? There's no reason that you need to put your whole palm on their body at any point. Unless they're being super rude, but even then, don't do that. So yeah, just think about animals. Hi, kitty. Think about animals whenever you think about consent, right? Like, as humans, our ego has a tendency to get in the way. Be like, well, I wanted to do that, so why shouldn't I do that? But you know what? Just because you want to doesn't mean you get to. And just because, say, you're interested in somebody or you really want to pet that dog or you really want to pet that cat, doesn't mean you get access to that. If the animal or the human being or something like that allows you to, then absolutely go ahead. But if not, don't. Like, I think that's just a good rule of thumb. If something is clearly uncomfortable, then don't touch it anymore. Like, I think that's pretty simple. And you know what? It can be, I understand, like, a lot of the issues with consent and boundaries now is that the lines are kind of blurred, and, say somebody you're interested in tells you they're not interested in you, but anytime you text them or if you text them or like anything, they'll message you or they'll flirt with you or something of that nature. That's where the boundaries get confused. If you're like, well, they say this, but they keep doing this, right? It makes it confusing, and while we need to communicate our boundaries clearly to people, we need to practice them is more what could be the issue too. Is, if I'm saying I don't want you to do that, but the next time you do it, I kind of let it slide. Yeah, you're gonna keep pushing it probably, right? So I think, truly, kitty, We have to practice our boundaries as much as we communicate them, and we definitely need to communicate them. If you're uncomfortable with something, say it. You don't have to scream it at a person unless you're in a very, very terrible situation. But just say, like, listen, that doesn't make me uncomfortable, or that does make me uncomfortable, or, let's talk about this instead, or, say there's a song or a movie or a certain place that is a trigger for you still. Just tell people that. People aren't mind readers. They don't know what your triggers and traumas are, and maybe they do, but they just forgot, right? So just state it again. Just keep bringing it up. Like, hey, remember that time we talked about this? It's still true. So let's remember it. The more you communicate those boundaries again, the more people will be receptive to it. Because only we can, how we allow other people to treat us is how they're going to treat us, right? So be honest about it, be communicative about it. People need to know. And, if you're in a situation where it is really uncomfortable or you need to talk to somebody, definitely do it, document it, all those kind of things. But I digress. So consent in that aspect too isn't just for romantic relationships. It is for everything. Like, say you even have a pet and people keep coming up and trying to pet that your dog or your cat or whatever, and that they're uncomfortable. Just be like, excuse me, my pet, maybe you're still training them so they don't get hyperactive and excited when they see people, or maybe you just know that they're not comfortable with it. Be like, I'm sorry, I get that you want to pet my animal, but they're not comfortable with it and I'm not comfortable with it, so just please don't. People have problems with that, that's their problem. And if they're aggressive about it, get it on video, document something, but interest does not mean access. And I think that's the biggest thing that we as people need to learn. And again, it gets blurred because of our egos. Like, I want it, so I'm gonna do it. And that's not always true, right? So no means no. It's a full statement. It is a full sentence. You do not need to explain it further than that. If you have to explain it further than that, you can just be like, it's a boundary. It's what I'm comfortable with. Please respect that. And if you don't respect it, I'm gonna get you in trouble. No, just communicate it, right? Like, and if that person has a problem, that's obviously on their end of it, and document it. I know in a lot of situations people don't have a tendency to believe if it's like a sexual assault case or things like that. Document it as much as you possibly can. Yeah, it just depends all on what kind of a situation you're in. Like, if it's to do with your boss, or if it's to do with a friend, or if it's to do anything like that, document it. Like, it needs to be documented as well. We got a little off topic there, but so consent isn't just for sexual relationships either. Like, it can be, sorry, she's sharpening her claws. It can be even to do with like your family members and maybe your friends. Like, even for children, I think consent, to teach them this, that their body is their body, boundaries, all of those things, I think is really important to teach at a very young age, because there's so many people around them at a given time, and to teach them that just because something is familiar doesn't always make it safe is good as well. Because the unfortunate part is a lot of sexual assault cases, it's done by somebody that you would know, and teaching kids that, oh well, you should hug them, or you should allow them to hug you just because they're an uncle or an aunt or a family friend or anything like that, doesn't mean it's a safe space for them, and that doesn't mean that's a safe person for them either. And to teach them that, if they get a feeling that they're uncomfortable, tell them that you don't want to. And you can even tell all your friends and family members, like, listen, we're teaching our kids about boundaries and about consent. Like, if they don't want to touch you, or if they don't want you to touch them, like, don't take it personal. They're working through their stuff. Maybe they had a bad day. Maybe, like, everybody has a bad day. We forget that, like, kids and even animals, they have bad days too. Like, they're not always on. So, they don't always want hugs. We don't always want hugs. We don't always want people to have access to us either. So I think we need to be respectful to everything else too. But to teach kids, that just because something is familiar doesn't make it safe is, it's something that's important. And to teach them their body is their body. If they're not comfortable with somebody touching them, tell them that. Again, they don't have to scream at them. Be like, this is my body. I don't want you to hug me right now. Deal with it. And that's kind of how, we should practice with other people, animals, things like that too. If they're clearly uncomfortable, don't push it. Like, why? Just because you want to hug that tiny, adorable little child doesn't mean you get to, right? And if they learn that you respect them through that too, they'll be more comfortable in those boundaries. And because we teach kids, be polite. If your grandpa wants to hug you, if your grandma wants to hug you, whatever, let them. That also gets them in situations too down the line that they're like, oh, I was just trying to be polite. And then they ended up in a situation where it was really uncomfortable for them or something bad happens, right? It's just like, well, I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want it to be uncomfortable for anybody. So I was just being polite. Like, I'm sure everybody can think of times that has been a situation for them, right? You're like, wow, I should have just been forthright and that person would have left me alone. And again, you don't have to be super rude about it. All you have to say is, I'm uncomfortable. I'm not interested in this. Please don't make me continue doing this. Or, if you're in a certain situation, you can just leave, or, a safe situation, call somebody, do something like that to come get you. It's not always going to be good when you put up boundaries, but that's something that people, you're going to have to learn to deal with, because people are uncomfortable allowing others to give them boundaries, right? Like, we all know somebody like that too. They just have no common decency or respect for somebody else's boundaries. Like, oh, I'm just joking, or oh, it's just a joke, and all of that. It's not a joke though. Maybe to you it was a joke, and because it didn't end very well, now you're responding like this, right? Like, it's pretty common. And again, I'm sure we've all been in a situation like that before too. So again, interest does not equate access. Just because you want to pet that dog, just because you want to hug that really cute kid, just because you're interested or attracted to somebody, you don't have access to their life. You don't have access to their body. Nada. Nothing like that. If you, respect that person, you will allow them to have those boundaries. And even if it's marriage or, your partner or anything like that, right? If that person doesn't want to be touched, if that person doesn't want to do certain things, just because you are married to them or just because you are in a relationship with them, that doesn't mean you get to do all these things, right? The person doesn't want to be touched. If they don't want to talk about a certain topic, they don't want to talk about a certain topic. They don't want to talk or, watch a certain movie because it brings up something for them. Don't make them watch that movie. Like, all these things, they should be dealing with their triggers and traumas on their own time. If they're not, that's their problem. But don't push it on them. And that's another lesson in consent too. They don't want to talk about something, don't talk about it. If they don't want to watch it, if they don't want to go somewhere specific because it brings up something bad for them, don't do it. It's as easy as that. Like, it doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be anything. Just don't do it. And again, that person needs to, get help for their own traumas or triggers or do that kind of work. That is not up to you to do. And by pushing it or forcing it on somebody, that will probably create resentment in the relationship as well. So just be wary of that. We don't want resentment. We want consent. Yay! It has to do with, it could be to do with family, could be to do with your friends, could be with work. Even if somebody at work, say, tries to add you on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, and you don't want them on there, you don't have to have them on there. That's a boundary that you get to have. So nobody gets to always have access to you. It's just the same with your phone, right? Just because we have our phones on us all the time, it makes people think they have access to us all the time. They do not. And don't respond to it. Don't feel the pressure to respond to it too. You don't have to, and you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to be like, oh, you know, I was so busy, I'm sorry. Just respond to that. Maybe you're dealing with something, maybe you're at work, you know, and same goes the other way. You don't get to have access to people at all times either. Just because you need an answer for something, just because you want the answer, or you need to know this, or whatever, doesn't mean you get to either. People are allowed to have their own lives. They're allowed to be processing their own things. Maybe they have really bad anxiety. Maybe they're having a depression nap. Who knows? You don't get to have access to people at all the times either. So that's another hard lesson for our egos to learn. You don't get to be included in everything. You don't have access to somebody all the time. And it's not up to you to, you know, push those boundaries or test those boundaries either. It is up to that person to communicate those boundaries to you. It is not up to you to know all these boundaries if they don't talk to you. People are not mind readers. If you have a boundary or you're uncomfortable with certain things, you need to state it so that people know. And then, you know, maybe you won't be, you know, included in certain things, but maybe that's because they're aware of those triggers for you. You know, say that you're a recovering alcoholic and going out to the bar or going out to certain places isn't comfortable for you still, and then you get upset that your friends are going out to all these places, they're not inviting you. You're like, well, they're trying to be respectful of you, you know, not being comfortable with that. And, you know, if you are comfortable with that at this point, tell them, and then maybe they'll invite you out. It's little things like that. And I think communication it's really difficult for some people. They're like, oh, they should just know. People don't just know. And I'm the kind of person too, if I know something's going on and somebody's not telling me directly, I will ignore it until that person steps up and talks to me like a human being. Or if maybe they just weren't ready to talk about it, maybe they just weren't aware of it. Keeps happening, then maybe you can bring it up, be like, listen, this is a consistent thing that keeps happening. Is this a problem for you? Is this something we need to talk about? And if it is, cool. If they need to talk about it with a therapist, if they need to talk about it with their friends, whatever, let them do that. But again, it is not for us to push people and push those people's boundaries and, you know, push their healing along the way. That's not for us to do.